Good morning, evening, and night, everyone. Lemon here, and today we have another deck analysis video. Today we'll be going over Yellow Bleach and why I pick certain cards in the deck, why I love this deck. It's very control heavy, very damage heavy, so if you really enjoy those aspects of the game, maybe give this deck a try. It is a lot of fun to play. Now, let's go ahead and get to the SRs of the deck. Of course, we have some As Not going on, Ugram, and the king himself, Uabach. Going into the why I choose these cards, As Not is a 4K body. Now, why do I choose it over Bambietta, the other 4K that we could choose from in this deck? It's because he has Impact 1. That's it. That is the only reason. Bambietta in this current, what we have to play with, is not that great in my opinion. Having that Impact 1 over her KOing a Resta card, which is already hard to pull off if you don't run that very specific deck line, and getting those combo pieces, yeah, the Impact 1 is just so much stronger. But in 99% of cases, I will tell you that we are just raiding this guy onto the front line, getting that early 4K body out there. We all know what it feels like to have that early 4K pressure coming at us, so having that in our deck as well as being a potential late game impact character is really, really strong. Next, we have Ugram here. Ugram, of course, another impact character. So adding to that pressure and stuff onto our opponent has two other really strong abilities. When played, if you have less cards in your hand than your opponent places one card from their hand into their sideline. Now, I do want to stress that don't worry about always getting this ability off. Do not let this ability, because you want to get full value or something like that, not progress your state of the game. You don't want to be held back by that. So don't worry about getting this win played off. If you do get it off, it is really nice, but don't let it hurt your game. That is one piece of advice I could definitely tell you when playing this card. We do want to get him out there when we can, so that way we could take advantage of his impact and we could take advantage of his other ability. His other ability is really strong. So at the end of the attack phase, as long as Ugram's still on the field, if they triggered any trigger, whether it be a draw trigger, get trigger, whatever it is, if they triggered a trigger during your attack phase, then you get to draw 2 trash 1, which is really strong because I don't have to tell you how good cycling through your hand is. Getting rid of those bricks, being able to net positive even one card is a really strong. If we have multiple Ugrams going on, then we get to do it twice. You know, whatever is going on, as long as they're still on the field, you get to do it 1 per Ugram on the field. So this is a really strong ability, allowing you to cycle through your deck, cycle through your hand, get what you need to progress your state of the game. Lastly, we have the king himself, Uabach, has 2 really strong abilities. First ability, if there are 2 or more characters sidelined during this turn, so he doesn't even have to be on the field when they're sidelined, keep that in mind, he gains 1,000 BP and damage 2. Damage 2, of course, we know is very oppressive, very strong ability. Everybody loves damage 2 with Renji. Uabach has it as well, and he also has a second ability which helps do the tempo in your favor. His second ability, when played, you get to either choose one to de-raid one of their characters, their rated characters, and take the basically top card and put it in the sideline. The bottom card still does stay on the front, but they have to choose at that moment to either use it as a chump blocker or whatever. So you get to de-raid something, which can be really strong, or you get to KO one of their 3,000 BP or less characters on their front line, which I most of the time try to go for that ability. Yes, if I have to de-raid, I do, and I kind of hope they use it as a chump blocker, because the bad thing about de-raiding is they could just slam another one down right after that because they already have the raid fodder on the field. So normally I'm trying to go for the 3,000 BP or less, but if I have to do a de-raid, I'll do a de-raid, because anything to progress my tempo and my state of the game helps my win rate and helps me win the match overall. So having these tempo swings with the de-raid or having the tempo swing with the 3,000 BP sidelining really helps, and that also helps trigger his first ability, which his first ability is every turn. As long as 2 characters are sidelined, this man will gain 1,000 BP and damage 2. So it can be really oppressive. A lot of people try to get rid of him when he's on the field because of the oppression and pressure that he does give off during a match. Next, we'll be going over the zeros, because the zeros from the other side is probably the most important things, and our SRs probably determine our zeros Of course, we have Ugram and Uaba here. Simply put, they are our raid fodder for those two cards. Now, we are not running the As Not. Instead, we are running Berenice. Berenice is a good card, not only because it's a 0, but it also is, of course, the resting card for gaining an extra energy generation. This is in a lot of decks. It just helps add with that consistency. I am privy to these cards a lot just because they do add to the consistency of being able to get into your 3 energy generation a whole lot easier. Instead of seeing 3 zeros, I just need to see Berenice and 1 0. And we'll get to that 3 energy generation to help progress our game, because not having that consistency, not being able to play the game is definitely going to hurt your game a lot. You know, it always sucks when you can't play the game because you just can't find that energy generation. So adding more cards that naturally give us that consistency does help, you know, progress your game state. This card also helps with Uaba. Now, Uaba states that if 2 characters are sidelined during this turn. Now, if we look back at Berenice, Berenice says that when you rest it, it is sidelined at the end of the main phase to sideline this character. So this counts as one of the sidelines that you need to get the Uaba ability off for the damage too. So there is a combo where you can do, and you could rest Berenice, get to 6 energy generation, raid Uaba, KO a 3000, and that's it. He is at 5000 damage too, which is really, really nice combo. It is something people don't think about it, that because KOing even cards on, or sidelining them on your area, it's the entire field, does add to this ability, and it just helps add to the combo of the Uaba. Now we're going to be talking about this a lot because the combo of Uaba is really impressive, and be able to get it out, you know, on the turn that it's played is even more important. Now, going into that, you can also use it with the special, of course. Special gets a KO anything on the front line as long as you have a Uaba on the field. So this is another combo where we'll use the special, KO a really oppressive rated character, hopefully, and then we'll raid Uaba and KO a chump blocker or something like that has less than 3000 BP. And we have another combo piece. So the more combo pieces, the 2 main ones here to get the 2 sideline characters during your turn to get that damage to 5000 BP is really important for us. 1/1s that we'll be going over are Mask, and we have Royd Lloyd. Mask here is a card that is a 1/1 bouncer. It's in a lot of decks. A lot of people like this card. I do like it as well in certain decks. I like it in this deck because we run Basby in this deck. We'll be talking about that we have to trash a card, but I mean, if we're constantly just playing out cards, we won't have any to trash. So Mask helps with bouncing a character to our hand that we may necessarily not need on the field because we drew like 3 Uabach zeros or something like that. You know, we bounce it back to our hand, use it later for the Basby or something like that, so we can get that damage too, but help adding to the strength of our hand, but also comboing it with the Berenice if we have to, because I do, like I said, like using Berenice to use the Uaba, but sometimes we got to use them early to get to that extra energy generation to be able to progress our game. And maybe we could play a Mask as well. We'll be at, you know, even more energy to bounce them back. You get what I'm saying. Berenice, Mask, good consistency cards. Being a 1/1 is very, very good. I do believe in running 1/1s in a deck. Not every deck needs them. It does add to consistency. I will never argue that. Now, another 1/1 we are running is Royd Lloyd. Royd Lloyd has a pretty good ability to where any card could be raided on him. He is raid fodder for any raid card. So we could raid As Not, because as you could see, we are not running the As Not 0. We are running Royd Lloyd instead of that, because like I said, in most cases, he's just a 4K body. But if need be, we could raid him onto Royd Lloyd. We don't have any Ugrams left, or we don't want to use our Ugrams, or they use it for energy or something, raid on a Royd Lloyd, you know? It's really strong for that ability, but it's even stronger because it's the 1/1, and adding the 1/1 in our deck helps add just so much consistency. Next, we have our mid-range, our mid-game plays going on here. We have Ugram, the 3/1, Uabach, and Robert. Now, first we'll be talking about Ugram here. Ugram If there are 2 or more 4000 BP characters on the opponent's field, so this includes the backline, he gains a 500 BP, which is really good, brings him to 4K. Of course, we know 4K is a really strong stat line. Being only a 3-1 cost gets that early 4K out there, because as soon as he stops being relevant as a 3-5 because they have multiple 4s, he becomes a 4, which is really, really good, because maybe they only have 3s on the field, and you have him and he's still getting the swings, he's still swinging over, but as soon as they get 2 or more 4s on the field, even if they perhaps raid from a trigger, he becomes a 4, which can be really strong and really clutch in some cases, and is just overall a good card. The more 4K bodies, the better. Uaba is a card that I do love playing against Kurapikas. Kurapika I'm talking about specifically because a lot of people have trouble with that matchup. But the 5-1 Kurapika that people play, and they get to look at the top card of their deck, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to keep that there. I am immediately playing Uaba after that, because you're keeping it there for a reason, and I want to know why. This card allows me to look at the top of your deck and choose to either keep it on the top of your deck or put it in the sideline, which is really strong. He's also our color trigger, so we're adding 4 of him in the deck naturally. But I love this Uaba because he's a 2 energy generation. It's a really strong ability as far as I'm concerned, even if they're not like, don't save it for the 5-1 Kurapika, but you need to play it for the energy. You could hit a special, you could hit a final, you could hit a key raid card for them. Those are all really strong cards that you're like, yeah, no, get rid of that. I can't tell you how many times that I've done Uaba and then they need a 2 energy generation card. You could clearly tell the state of the game on how they're playing and what they need, and boom, right there, it's right there on top, and you're like, yeah, we're gonna get rid of that card for you. And it just hurts them so much, and it's such a game changer sometimes, because I've sidelined multiple specials before, just getting the luck of the draw, but preventing them from progressing their game. It really, really helps a lot with this card. Lastly, we have good old Robert here. Robert, of course, allows me to draw an extra card, so he basically replaces himself if there is a 4000 BP on the opponent's field, again, including the backline. Don't always worry about this ability. It's way more important if you need the 2 energy generation. Now, if I had to choose between Uaba and Robert to play, if I had both of them in my hand, I'm probably going to be playing the Uaba, because I do want Robert replacing himself later in the game. So I will be definitely playing Uaba, but if you don't have Uaba in your hand, don't worry about it. Play Robert. Don't ever let your game not be progressed because you don't want to get full abilities off. This is something that new players struggle with, and something like that. They feel like they're not getting the full activation of all of their abilities. Sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you just need 2 energy generation. That's why we put Robert in here. He does have a really nice ability, but again, it is really, really good to get that energy generation so we can move into our bigger pieces, bigger combos, and stuff like that. Next, lastly, we have the last character card in our deck. We have Basby going on here. Basby is a really, really strong just card in general, just because he has, let me go in here. Basby, if I discard 1 card from my hand, he has damage 2. Damage 2, again, being really strong. Normally my play is getting Basby in the back line. Next turn, I'm going to push up Basby. Then I'm going to raid Uaba, and I'm going to metalize one of your targets, and I'm discard a card from hand. This gives me 2 characters on my front line that are hitting damage 2. That is really strong. If you have multiple Basbys, I'm going to be drawing 1 every turn and discarding 2 from hand. It is super strong and super oppressive. People will thirst over Basby. Of course, he's a 4K, so he's not hard. He's pretty hard to get over because there's not a lot of 5Ks in the game currently. He's just so strong. I love Basby. He's really strong. We love running this card, getting those multiple damages in. I think my record's like 7 damage in 1 turn with this deck. It's such a really, really strong card, and we definitely love playing this card. Next, we'll be going into our events. Of course, we have Metalize. We do run, of course, a final, and we are running the Jail. Jail is a slotted pick I decided to do simply because it's an extra way to close out a game. Perhaps they have 4 blockers on their front line. You don't have any impacts. Guess what? All we need is Jail. All we need is this Jail in our hand. We rest one of their front lines. able to swing over their 4 characters, get that last point of damage in. It's kind of just a clutch card. It's kind of really surprising too for people, and it also has an active trigger. So it has a really good trigger. It's a pretty good ability. People are normally surprised by it, so I do like running it right now, and it is just overall a pretty good card. Now let's go ahead and get into the ratios of the deck. First off, we are running only 3 Ugrams. Now this is because we do have multiple raid targets for Ugram, so I wanted to slot in to other directions. We have 4 Uabas. Now you might be saying the same argument, but I mean, it's either I choose Uaba or Ugram. I mean, it's up to personal preference. You could run 4 Ugrams, 3 Uabas in this build. It's not really going to affect anything, but since Uaba is the target for Metalize here, where we have to have an Uaba or a rated character on our opponent's front line, you know, I definitely want to add to the consistency of being able to use Metalize, because getting the full effect of Metalize, I do argue, is more important than not getting the full effect of Metalize. So I do run for 4 Uabas in this deck. Now we are also going to be running 4 Berenice, because Berenice is one of our key combo cards for our Uaba raid. It's just so good. It feels so nice to get that damage 2 off on a lot of turns, because we're not only relying on Metalize, we're not only relying on the win played ability. Heck, we could even not do a win played Uabans to have them on the field and do a Berenice Metalize. We can do also a Berenice and Keynote if they block. If they block, say you swung with Basby and they block that, which by the way, also, I forgot to mention, replaces the card. You get to draw a card if they block, because it wins a battle. So as long as you won a battle with Basby, he gets to replace the card back. Another amazing feature of Basby. But getting that block in from the Basby activates Uaba, because we rested the Berenice and we got to trash him. So that's 2 sideline during the turn, which means Uaba has now 5k BP and 2 damage. Really strong combo, and people don't realize that this helps add to the Uaba, and it's really important for that, and it's really important for the consistency of the deck. Now we do also have 2 masks and only 2 Roid Lloyds. Now simply because I think 3 Roid Lloyds is probably a little too many for the deck. It doesn't really do much besides adding consistency of the 1/1 and being a raid fodder target, but if we have too many raid fodders, it's and later on we could always trash them for Basby, but we definitely don't want to be running too many of those, because our deck's just too tight. Yeah, we could get rid of our jail, but like I said, jail's kind of fun. I really do enjoy jail. Again, with the mask, we don't want too many of them, so we don't want them clogging up too much. Getting early game too many of these is really painful in my opinion, so we definitely don't want to add too much. We would just want those 4 1/1s to help add consistency to the deck. Now, of course, these mid-range guys, we are going to be running 4 Ugrams and 4 Uabas. This is a color trigger. Again, this one is super strong. You could hit really good on the reveal, and it's a color trigger. So we're definitely going to be running 4 of that. Ugram is a active trigger, which is a really strong trigger that people enjoy, but is also a really strong card, getting up to that 4k BP in that mid game, early game even, can be really strong. Lastly, we have our Roberts, which we're only running 3 of. Again, the deck list is really tight with our top end, so we definitely had to make some cuts somewhere. And Robert, I mean, he's really good at replacing himself, which is an ability I'm never going to argue with. But over these 2, I'd rather have less Roberts and have 4 of these 2, opposed to having 4 Roberts in the deck. Next, we're going to be adding in 4 As-Nots, because 4k bodies, 4 Ugrams, because 4k bodies and also really strong, 4 Basbys, because 4k bodies and also really strong, and lastly, only 3 Uabas. Now, the only reason why Uaba is not at a 4 of is because of that 6 energy generation, and, you know, after a couple turns of, say we raid on this guy, on his raid fodder, and then we do it again or something like that, or if we have to raid on the 2 energy generation one just because we didn't see the other 2 energy generations, or Berenice, something like that, we're kind of tight on energy. So we definitely don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we can't summon him at all because we're tight on the energy generation, just simply because we never saw any of our zeros. We only saw this one. So, I mean, if we have to raid on it, we have to raid on it, right? And to progress our game, because again, we don't want to be holding cards in our hand to stall out our game. That's one thing we definitely don't want to be doing. So having him at a 3 of was a choice of mine, opposed to putting, you know, this down to 3 and this up to 4. This is a 4-1. This is a 6-1. That's kind of all it's coming down to. It's a really strong card, but 3 of felt really, really nice for me. For the events, we do have only 1 jail. Like I said, this is kind of a pick that a lot of people are pretty surprised with, and a lot of people aren't expecting in my deck. So we do only run 1 of it. It does add a little extra factor. People might be thinking, oh, is he running multiple jails, because they don't expect it. No, we only run 1 of it, and that's perfectly fine. It feels really good. I do tend to see it because we do get draws from the Basby. We do get draws from the Robert. We do get draws from the Ugram. So even having a card at a 1 of doesn't feel too bad in this deck. Of course, we have 4 finals and 4 metalized. That puts us at a total of 50 cards in the deck. I really enjoy playing this deck. It does have a lot of damage. Like I said, I've had up to 7 damage coming in 1 turn against a player, and that is a lot of pressure. That is a lot of pressure coming at you. Getting these Basbies out early is really good. Getting these Uaba combos, which again, with the metalized, with the Berenice, really easy to pull off, getting that damage too. Having both of these out on the field, even more insane. Can you imagine having 2 Basbies and an Uaba, all with damage 2 coming at you? Even if the Uaba didn't have damage 2 at first, 2 Basbies coming at you with damage 2, you're probably going to block one of them, which is just going to activate Uaba, which is going to be crazy, you know, pressure coming at your opponent. That's a really good thing about this deck. It has so much pressure and so much coming at them. If they use their specials and everything on these 2, they still have the Ugram to deal with, or the Asna if I raid into Roidloid. Granted, my chances are low, and this guy is probably, like I said, going to be a 4K body, but they still have the Ugrams to deal with, which is an impact character. Really strong. If they have to pick and choose what they use their specials and their removals on in this deck, because there's just so many strong things going on, so many strong cards happening in the deck. It just feels really nice to play. So I do recommend, if you do like control-y decks, if you do like aggressive decks with a lot of damage coming at you, a lot of draw power, do give this deck a try and let me know what you think of the deck, because I do really enjoy it. My wife enjoys playing Yellow Bleach. People trash on Yellow Bleach a lot, but I'm telling you, it's a really fun deck. I do hope you enjoyed the video. I do hope you enjoyed this deck analysis. This is a series that we do plan on doing for probably the rest of Union Arena, because I like testing out the decks. I do like putting them through the ringer, you know, perhaps getting some wins at locals and stuff like that before I show you these decks. So they have been through a lot of testing, and this is kind of what I fall on at the end of the day. Is this deck is really good. So I hope you enjoyed this deck analysis. Let me know down in the comments if you've tried this deck and you've won any locals with it yourself, and if you enjoy Yellow Bleach simply because you just enjoy the characters themselves. Lastly, I just hope you have a good night.